We finally have a name to put to the upcoming crisis at DC Comics. It's going to be Dark Crisis. That's what we're moving towards. I guess it makes sense with the lead villain being the Great Darkness and his Dark Army. And Dark Crisis is the title of DC's major 2022 event that we have been talking about here on the channel, I don't know, for 9 months now. That's been the big rumor out there. We knew that we were heading to a crisis in 2022. That's why it felt like Infinite Frontier and Future State were so hollow. Like, we were literally told when those were coming out that don't worry about this because you got another event that's going to reset everything just in a few months anyway. And, you know, we just come off of Dark Knight's death metal. Ugh, whatever. And this will be spinning out of the death of Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and others, i.e. the death of the Justice League. DC has been building towards this Dark Crisis in various titles for most of 2021, following the last major DC Universe event, which was Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Dark Knight's death metal. And it finally, as we said, has a name. It's Dark Crisis. I have a problem. You know, I don't know that the word dark only has to do with the Great Darkness or with the Dark Army. I have a sneaking suspicion, and it would... I really hope it's not true. I really hope I'm wrong with this. I hope it has nothing to do with the Dark Multiverse. The Dark Multiverse is just... It should be in Elseworlds, but they're treating it as if it's part of the Omniverse. Remember, because the Omniverse exists, everything exists all the same time. And there's even a multiverse called Elseworld, and they all exist, you know, with the Earth Prime and the Dark Multiverse. Please, I don't want any more Dark Multiverse stories like in mainline continuity, and certainly not affecting all the titles. I really hope that's not the case. They had a series called Tales from the Dark Multiverse, which is actually pretty good. They had like really darker versions of some of these crises and things that have happened in the past. I thought it was pretty dope. Like, it was a good place if you want to tell Dark Multiverse stories. That was a good vehicle to do it. I don't like Dark Knight's metal. I know it felt fresh and new to people, but the luster's worn off. Certainly with Dark Knight's death metal, I think most people were like, please just go away. I don't ever want to hear about the Source Wall again. I don't ever want to hear about the Dark Multiverse again. Go away and never come back. So hopefully the name Dark in Dark Crisis has nothing to do with the Dark Multiverse, but I have a feeling that it might. The other real big problem with this, obviously we've been talking around it, but they just reset the DC Comics universe. How many times are we going to do a DC Comics universe reset and then flub it all up within a matter of months? Specifically, coming out of Dark Knight's death metal, and for what I was told behind the scenes was that Scott Snyder was kind of like the architect for DC Comics. Originally, it was him and Bendis. Once they took Bendis's exclusive contract status away, it was just Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder got elevated, and they were going to use Dark Knight's death metal as a jumping on point, and Scott Snyder was going to be kind of not hands-on the fact that he was going to be writing the stories, but he was going to be overseeing and ushering the new direction of DC Comics through Future State and into Infinite Frontier. So it sounded initially like there was a plan, but I think it's clear at this point. You know, Scott Snyder, he certainly is still associated with DC Comics, but I think he's got his eye on other prizes. He's got all those Comixology exclusives. He's got multiple projects being published right now at Image Comics, as well as he's got his Substack deal. Does he have time for DC Comics? Obviously not, because we've had an aimless, rudderless DC Comics universe for quite some time now, specifically coming out of Infinite Frontier. I'm sorry, out of Future State and into Infinite Frontier. And for some reason, one of the things that most of these writers who hadn't had a lot of experience in DC Universe and certainly aren't really associated with DC Comics or the characters, they just decided to go towards Future State, which is supposed to be, I thought it was supposed to be some alternate reality that wouldn't happen, like maybe an Age of Apocalypse type event, which I think that's what DC 5G originally was going to be. But then you have Superman moving towards that with Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics. And then you had Gotham being taken over by the Magistrate. That was right out of Future State. Then you've got the Green Lanterns losing all the powers right out of Future State. And so a lot of these titles were going directly towards what Future State was. And then some of them weren't. And then some of them kind of are going there, and then some of them aren't. You're like, what the hell is this DC Comics universe? I don't think they even know. And I think that's one of the big problems out of this. So you say, well, maybe it is time for another reset. Well, probably, you know, it's a clusterfuck right now. DC Comics do need to unfuck themselves, but they can't just keep relying on crisis events. It's getting ridiculous. There have been a finite amount of crisis events. We'll go through them right now. Crisis on Infinite Earths, the very first one in 1985. 9 years later, you finally get the second crisis, 0 Hour Crisis in Time. Another 11 years, you get the third crisis, Infinite Crisis in 2005. And then this is when the pace starts picking up. 2008, we get Final Crisis. Well, that was a lie. 2011, we get Flashpoint. 2015, so they waited a whole 4 years before Convergence. 2017, Dark Knight's Metal. And then 2020, Dark Knight's Death Metal. And in 2022, Dark Crisis. They are rebooting the universe faster and faster and faster and faster, and it's getting ridiculous. Why should I invest in anything after Dark Knight's Death Metal if I know 2 years later you're just going to reset everything again? At least before, they would wait 10 years, 9 years or something. You got to give us at least 5 years. Once you do a reset, DC Comics needs to commit to at least 5 years in this current timeline. If we go astray, let's try and bring it back without having to resort to another crisis event. It is getting beyond ridiculous at this point. Now, some of you will ask, we've been leading into Dark Crisis. You know, we've got Infinite Frontier. We had Justice League Incarnate right now. Is that all the build-up? That is not all the build-up. It turns out Dark Crisis will begin with a free-to-readers Dark Crisis number 0 on Free Comic Day on May 7th. And that will continue later in the spring with a Justice League Road to Dark Crisis special. Guarantee you that sumbitch ain't free. That was going to be $8. And then a standalone Dark Crisis limited series. What I'm not sure about, because we know that Joshua Williamson has said that Infinite Frontier, the series, not the DC Comics initiative, there's the initiative and then there's the series. Could it be more confusing? Infinite Frontier, the series, Justice League Incarnate, which he's written both of, are parts of a trilogy that are going to happen. I am not certain if this Dark Crisis is the third part of the trilogy or the third part of that trilogy leads into Dark Crisis. I can tell you right now, we will have more details tomorrow. Joshua Williamson has already said that on social media, but I'm covering the information that we have now. Expect another video on this with more additional information, probably tomorrow or the next day. So I don't know what part of the trilogy this is. Is the trilogy leading into Dark Crisis, or is Dark Crisis the third part of the trilogy? I would say it's probably going to be the latter, that the Dark Crisis probably is the end part of this. There are no creative details specifically announced as far as Dark Crisis, but you can guarantee Joshua Williamson is going to be all over that. He's kind of the only thing going at DC Comics right now. There are a couple of series here and there, and a couple of writers doing good things. Ray M.V. on Swamp Thing, Phil Kennedy Johnson, specifically on Action Comics. I personally like, or I've heard good things about Suicide Squad, although they are changing the writers soon. But Joshua Williamson has a lot of their best stuff, you know, whether it be his current run on Batman, Robin, which is really good, Deathstroke Inc. He's got the Rogue series coming up as well, Justice League Incarnate, and obviously he's moving towards this. So his fingerprints will be all over this crisis, and it will be his crisis. He is officially the main fucking man, the head motherfucker in charge when it comes to creative at DC Comics. There's no question about that. It's not Scott Snyder. It's not Jeff Johns. It's not Tom King. Certainly not Brian Michael Bendis. This is the Joshua Williamson-Are, and they are kicking it off and really announcing it to everybody with this big crisis event. Williamson's also going to be writing the Death of the Justice League issue, Justice League number 75, which will be the last of that series that Brian Michael Bendis basically destroyed. And so that will be coming to an end under his watch. That is guaranteed to lead right into this. So there are a lot of things moving down the tracks to lead to this crisis event. Are you excited about Dark Crisis? I certainly have hesitations. I don't think we need another crisis event to DC Comics. If you're going to pick somebody at DC to do it, I guess Williamson would be the man, because he's got an overwhelming majority of the good product that DC Comics are putting out right now are penned by Joshua Williamson. So that's the positive. But if you're doing a crisis every 2 or 3 years, the crisis don't mean anything anymore. They need to put a little bit of space between these. Are they going to listen to me? Absolutely not. I don't think DC Comics really care about their fans or customers or any of that stuff anymore. I think they want to get a crisis in right in time for this Discovery merger, and they can say, look, we're doing something. We saw that there was a problem with the sales. We can always sell Batman. Look, we got a crisis, and we're resetting it. You know, you give us some time to see how it works, kind of a thing. So That's the news that we have now, but there will be more details coming over the next few days in this week. So be looking out for that. If you don't have the details as far as the death of the Justice League in Justice League number 75 and Josh Williamson, I made a video about it about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago. You definitely need to check this out if you're interested in this dark crisis and the events coming up in DC Comics. This is important.